Hello, everyone. This is Heart to Art, and I'm Peta-Gaye Nash. And this is where I delve deeply into artists and their work to find out why and how they create the amazing work they do. Welcome to the very first episode of Heart to Art. Today on Heart to Art, I'm so excited to welcome Paula de Ronde for our very first episode. Paula has written a book called My Bert Has Alzheimer's, and I was excited to talk to Paula today because it's estimated that about 44 million people worldwide suffer from Alzheimer's or some other kind of dementia, including my late grandfather. So this is a topic that is so close to my heart. Paula is not only author, but she is speaker, advocate on behalf of elder care and long-term care reform. So I am so excited to talk with Paula today. Welcome to the show, Paula. Okay, so hi, Paula, and welcome to the very first podcast of Heart to Art.
I am so pleased to be with you, Peta-Gaye.
It's wonderful to have you here. Now, Paula, you've written an incredible memoir. Your book is My Bert Has Alzheimer's, Caregiving is Living for Two. This book really touched me. It was heartwarming, sometimes painfully sad, heartbreaking at times. It actually made me cry. It's a love story, yet it is also a survival guide to Alzheimer's. How did you manage to merge these two genres together?
Well, I like that, a survival guide to Alzheimer's and linking it to a love story, because there is a reason that caregivers call the people that they care for loved ones. I don't think you can go through this kind of journey, this kind of challenge without love. And when I talk about caregivers, I also include like personal support workers who go to work every day and give an incredible amount of love and care to people who are not their family members, but who they are looking after in what is a really good description: personal support. And boy, do they work. Linking the two was quite easy for me, actually, because we know that all my friends will say, "Oh, there she is, so Bert is around." We were totally in sync. In fact, how we met, you talk about love at first sight. Bert saw me once, went to his sister-in-law and said, "I just met the woman I'm going to marry."
I love your story.
Just
Please
like
share more.
Well, sharing more means that, like every couple, we had our ups and our downs. Oh, one funny thing though, when your loved one, when your spouse, in this case, gets Alzheimer's, it's amazing how they forget. He would tell everybody, "Oh, we never had a fight. We never had." And I would just look at him and think, I said, "Well, every bad cloud has a silver lining. So this is one. We never had a fight. Oh, we had some Donnybrooks, yeah."
What do you think drew Bert to you? You were both immigrants, you from Jamaica, he was from the Netherlands. He saw you once.
And
Love at first sight.
love at first sight. He just chose me at first sight, and it took a while. He actually he actually proposed 3 times before I said yes, because my focus was on becoming a librarian, doing my studies, going to U of T. I mean, marriage was not on the horizon. And yet, before 2 years was up, I was Mrs. Hubertus Cornelius de Ronde. You know, and I am not sure, even up until at our 50th wedding anniversary, we were still talking to friends and saying, "Gosh, talk about poles attracting, because
Mhm.
our culture was different. How we grew up was different. Everything was so different. We should not have been compatible. And yet, I would not have wanted anyone else. Bert was the best person for me, and I was for him.
Speaking of your wedding anniversary, if
Yeah.
my memory serves me correct, it was at your 50th wedding anniversary when you realized that something was truly wrong. Am I correct in saying that 2 weeks after that, he had forgotten that you were married?
No, no, that's not correct. Our 50th anniversary actually took place just before he went into long-term care.
Okay. Okay.
So, and up until that, and at that time, he was already um, realized. We had known for 7, 8 years that he
Oh.
was there. So it was during that journey. Um, but at the 50th wedding anniversary, it was so funny. A minister who was dear to us, he was leading the thing, and he said to we're doing our vows again, and he said to Bert, if you had to do this over again, would you marry Paula? And Bert looked around. He says, let me think about that. I mean, the entire room just burst into laughter because they knew, haha, here was Bert again.
Mhm.
One of the things that attracted me to him, Bert lived. He had an inner joie de vivre that was instant. I was not the only one attracted to him. Everyone he met was attracted to him, and
Mhm.
there was he made me laugh on the saddest, most heartrending times. He could make me laugh. And he was vivacious and outgoing, honest. What you saw was what you got. And he never stopped trying to help others. So I think that was part and parcel of the attraction, even though we would not have articulated it that way when we just met.
That brings up an interesting point that you mentioned throughout the book, that Alzheimer's brings out the essence of who you are as a person, which can be wonderful for some people and maybe a little scary for others.
Yes.
So when you said that he tried to be helpful all throughout, I remember a part in the book where you had hurt yourself and he was in the long-term facility. He was so concerned that you were hurt. But can you tell me a little bit more about this? Why does it bring out the essence of who we are?
Because let's start at the beginning, okay? You notice something is not quite right, both of you,
Mhm.
because this is a long journey. So at the beginning, your loved one is still there with you every step of the way. But you realize something is not quite right. And you go through all these myriad tests and you go to see all the specialists. And then D-Day comes when your neurologist will look at you and say, yes, the diagnosis I'm confirming is dementia, and in your case, Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And when you hear that, in that instant, your entire life changes. You know immediately that what was will not be anymore.
Mhm.
If you think about it, it's usually referred 6 to 20 plus years is the normal time. Though I have personally met someone who was in the 25th year of Alzheimer's disease.
Wow.
So, what are you going to do then? And plans you were made. Did you have 5 year goals? Did you have 1 year goals? Um,
Mhm.
it just doesn't work anymore. Everything is going to become part and parcel of this journey. And so Alzheimer's tells you, okay, hold on. This is a paradigm shift in your life. And you realize as the caregiver immediately that a diagnosis of dementia is never for one person. it's for at least 2 or more. In
Right.
our case, if the essential caregiver has that diagnosis too,
Yeah.
because you are going to be the lodestar, the touchstone, the guide, the one who is
Mhm.
going to have one foot in what we call the real world and the other foot in Alzheimer's world, because that's
Mhm.
how you're going to be able to cope.
Yes. You seem to know instinctively how to go into Alzheimer's world. You went back and forth between the real world, as you said, and Alzheimer's world. Um, you also had a chapter where you talked about therapeutic lying, and you treated him with so much dignity, so much love, so much grace. You didn't argue with him. You and a lot of people don't really know how to do this, is what I'm trying to say. Someone is repeating things to us 5 times. We get angry, we get annoyed, we try to correct them. But you somehow knew that that was not the way to go. How did you know how to do that?
Well, there are two things here. Um, Once I got the diagnosis, I didn't just sit down and say, well, the world has come to an end. And I think perhaps my training as a librarian, that's my profession,
Mhm.
I started looking where to go, who to ask, find out what was happening. And it is one of the first things when I'm giving presentations, I say to caregivers, if you're going to be successful as a caregiver, you have to know this disease inside and out. So, first, you have to teach yourself, train yourself. And it's interesting that you should bring up therapeutic line, because there are some who think that, no, you never do that. And some who think, wow, well, I am definitely on the pro side, because it all depends on why you do it and how you do it. You're doing it to relieve anxiety. You're
Mhm.
doing it to take away stress. You're doing it, and it's stress for both you and the other person. And you're doing it to help strangers when your loved one says to you, oh, I can drive. Sure, I can still drive. Come on, where are the car keys? And pick it up to go. No, no, no. And then you wouldn't believe how creative caregivers become. It's not just me.
Mhm.
We all learn to do that. We have had cars that have been in the shop for 6 months, just to make sure. I mean, and that's what therapeutic is like. You don't set out to lie. Another thing I found out was that you don't initiate the lie. It's the loved one that does, right? So he says to me one day, he says, "Oh, tomorrow I'm going to go fishing with George." Now, well, he said Gerard. I'm going to go fishing with Gerard. Now, that's his brother, the brother who had died 2 years before.
Mhm.
What am I going to do? Tell him you can't go. That's impossible. Or try to
Mhm.
explain? No, you don't.
Mhm.
What happens then is that I said, oh, you want to go fishing with Gerard? Do you know what? Let's go look for the fishing rod. I wonder if I can find them. Well, I'll go look for them maybe tomorrow or something like that. We'll go look for it and we'll go. It relieves his need because, okay, I'm going to go tomorrow to fish in that moment. It relieves
Mhm.
me. How am I going to explain to him that his brother is dead?
Mhm.
How sad is
Right.
that going to be? What is that going to bring up? Why should I
Yeah.
do that? Right?
Mhm.
So it relieves me of causing him more pain.
Right.
Right? And so there it is. He's relieved. I am relieved. And here is the thing about Alzheimer's. By the time I say, let's have a cup of tea, he has forgotten that he was going fishing with Gerard tomorrow.
Yes. And the
So,
book is filled with nuggets like this, a real guide to anyone who is going through the same thing.
yes. And it was
Full of,
intended as such. Yeah.
yeah. And it's also full of humor and a lot of hope as well. It's not just heartbreaking, but one heartbreaking thing I'd like to bring up is that you had a terrible loss in your life.
Yes.
you lost one of your sons.
Yes.
And he was a teenager.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it was heartbreaking when you realized that instead of a shared memory between you and Bert, you would now have to remember for two.
Yes. Yes. That was perhaps one of the darkest days because as a couple, we had language, tradition, little things that was just ours. Now I should
Mhm.
tell you that if it was slated, written down by fate, that we would lose a son at 19 years old with 7 other sons and daughters, I would not have wanted to go through that with anyone else but with my Bert.
Mhm.
It was unbelievably hurting, and it still
Mhm.
does. But
Mhm.
we had developed a way to remember. And the thing is that Damien was very much like Bert. He brought joy to everybody. And there are maybe, I think, 9, 10 people who are named Damien after him. That's the
Oh,
impact he had.
wow.
And so every anniversary of the death, Bert and I had a little ritual that we did. And then came Alzheimer's. And
Mhm.
there was this year when I woke up expecting the ritual and nothing happened. And I realized that this terrible, horrible disease had finally taken away a memory that I had wanted to remain for both of us.
Mhm.
And that day was a terrible day for me. But
Mhm.
when I realized now I didn't want to remind him that Gayrod, his brother, had died. How do you tell your Alzheimer's partner that his son had died? Why would I bring up that memory? And this is
Mhm.
part of the stress for caregivers
Mhm.
because that was a day I wanted to share. That was a day I wanted our togetherness to be strong as we held hands and did our little ritual in memory of our son.
Mhm.
And that was the day I also realized that from that day forward, whenever there was the anniversary of the death, I would have to remember for me, and I had to remember for Bert, and I had
Mhm.
to make that day just another ordinary day.
Wow, Paula, you have the strength of a million women, I have to say.
Um, there is, cliches become cliches and bon mots and sayings become so because there is a nugget of truth in them. And there is the one that says, the, the greater the love, the greater the pain.
Mhm.
And I have had that. And there's the one that says that you learn and you get strength from the challenges that you face. And it's true. I am happy. I can smile. I go out with my friends. I have social times, and yet I have been through so much. But there is something that is. I have never been comfortable with people. There. Every now and then you will hear someone say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," but so and so had this, that, the other, the other, the other. It has never really sit well with me. And we
Mhm.
know why. They're trying to say that you go through this, but there are people who are suffering worse than you. I don't like
Mhm.
that. What I
Mhm.
would prefer is to say, look, it is life.
Mhm.
No one in this world goes through life scot free.
Mhm.
So, what I prefer to do is to help, to be commiserative, to say, how can I help? What can I do? Not to make me feel that I don't have as much as, or
Mm-hmm.
not suffering as much as. No, each person's grief is special to them.
Of course.
And so whether mine is thought of as being horrendously horrific or not so bad in comparison, the comparison has never sat well with me.
Very wise words. You are also surrounded by so many friends. And even when you are going through this time with Bert, all throughout the book are incidents of people showing you so much love and care.
Mhm.
Uh, Perhaps it's a person that you are, but what if someone is going through a similar situation?
Mhm.
Their spouse has been diagnosed with dementia or, some
Mhm.
other debilitating illness, but they are maybe not as social or they don't know how to reach out. What advice would you give to those people who just feel so alone in this pain?
The advice is that no matter how alone you are, you're not.
Mhm.
First, you have to dig deep for your own resources. But I also say, never be afraid to ask.
Mhm.
Believe that for every one person who might refuse, there are 100 who will say yes. And there are people who are just waiting to be asked. And you're lucky if you have people you meet who don't wait to be asked. But one of the things that, whatever your particular problem is,
Yes.
there is a support group. I am, with Damien, our support group were not anybody that was organized. We just reached out to friends. It was so traumatic. But
Mhm.
with a disease like Alzheimer's, cancer, those things that you need help. But the
Mhm.
best thing about a support group is that you are talking with people who are in the same boat. You
Yeah.
never have to begin the conversation over again. You
Mm.
just continue. And in my case, we learned so much from each other. I called them, I dubbed them the lifeliners.
I love that.
And my lifeliners were actually what they were. We were
Mhm.
each other's lifelines. And we learned from each other, what happened yesterday? Well, oh my Lord, so and so and so. And you know what I did? Hey, that's a good idea. Now, Alzheimer's manifests itself individually. We are individuals, and everything affects us when you have dementia
Mhm.
because it is working on your brain. It
Mhm.
is working on the engine of your body. And that engine, when it is confused, is confused. So each person, what is going to affect them? For example, with Bert, he would go back to the Netherlands. Now, I knew enough to have a conversation, but not totally. And I suppose with me, should I have it? Please, Lord, no. It would be going back to Jamaica and my childhood, because that's what you do. You regress into the beginning. Um,
Mhm.
I write about living in reverse.
Mhm.
And there is that other old saw, once a man, twice a child. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what happens. So in the
Mhm.
beginning, consider you have a child, you have the hopes, the expectations, you look at the milestones that are coming all the way up. And all
Mhm.
of a sudden you have this horrible disease. See, there's no
Yeah.
escaping. There's no escaping from the horror of disease.
Mhm.
But how are you going to live with it? How are you going to make it your own? You are going to cry rivers of tears.
Mhm.
You are going to be riddled with a lot of fear because you never know from one day to the next what will happen. Things can
So,
turn on a
yeah,
dime.
they really can.
But You do not have to be broken.
Mhm. I love the honesty in this memoir. I love when you ask the question, um, and I have it here. It was in the chapter In Praise of Love, where you asked yourself, if I could have seen the future, knowing what you knew, knowing what I know is what you said, quote, would I have married Bert? And this had nothing to do with your love for Bert, of course. It had to do with the pain and the trauma of being a caregiver to someone with this disease.
Yeah.
And I loved your answer at the end. Can you share more about that?
What was my answer?
Your answer was yes, a resounding yes. You would have done it all over again, knowing what you know.
The thing is that life really is a journey. And in that journey, you can only grasp and make sure you live the best life you can in the present. You do not know what's in the future. So, if I think what I did actually was I had two columns, the pros and the cons. What happened? And the thing about it is that Alzheimer's does teach you to recognize the small things. The
Mhm.
big things are there, the death. And when I say death, mother, father, all of that, all those big things that have a traumatic effect on you. But then you start recognizing and learning to see the small things. And in the book, I call it living in smalls. And I do a presentation called that because Alzheimer's, one of the worst things about it is once you have it, there is no up.
Mm.
The trajectory is downward.
Yeah.
So, to use a simple example, Bert and I loved to dance. We danced all over the world on various ships. Wherever you had music, we were dancing.
I love your pictures.
And so we went from dancing up a storm. And as Alzheimer's took its toll, I learned to dance with someone using a cane. I learned to dance with someone using a walker. And boy, was I good at the wheelchair dance. We kept on dancing. And that is what something I tell the people that speak with me about this. And that is, you do not stop living because you've got this diagnosis. What you do is create and adapt to a life that embraces the fact that you're a caregiver, the most important person in this person's life. And this person who is your loved one, whether it's mother, father, sister, brother, spouse, or what. And so you embrace that. And as the disease progresses downward, your heart and your love open upward. And on the worst days, when you feel that, the thing says, my doctor had this in his office. When you think you've reached the end of the rope, tie a knot in it and hang on.
Mm.
So Alzheimer's teaches you that. Some days I was so tired. Sleep deprivation comes with this disease. And I was so tired some days, I just didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
Then memory of all things would take you back to some of the most delightful times in your life. And that's all you had. That was the knot in the rope of that day to hang on to.
Right. And as if that wasn't hard enough, then 2020 comes and the world changes with the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
And Bert called it the big sickness. And it really was the big sickness, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And you couldn't see him for 3 months.
Yes.
But somehow you got through that time as well. And he was your shadow. He did not want to be apart from you. So, it was painful enough to leave him at the caregiver facility. But then COVID came along and you could not see him.
Involuntary separation times three. Because one of the most traumatic things a caregiver does is when they have to decide that, yes, they can no longer be the one person they need to have in a long-term care facility. That is an enormously traumatic decision to make. Then it is involuntary separation. And I can tell you that for almost 3 months, I would visit Bert, and I visited Bert every single day until the day he died. And for nearly 3 months, visited, stayed with him, went to the car, cried for 20 minutes, and then drove home. And the crying was not because I was so distraught at how he was getting really good care. I saw to that. But it was, why are you leaving? Can't I come with you? I want to sleep with you. Come sleep in the bed with me. We can go to sleep tonight. When are you coming back? And that's another thing that got me with therapeutic lying. I learned pretty soon not to say I'm coming back tomorrow or even in an hour, in an hour, because time meant nothing in the brain of someone with dementia. Time has no meaning. So my little therapeutic lie was, sweetheart, I'm coming soon. I went grocery shopping almost every day, not, or I had to get gas. And as for the doctor's appointments, no, I do have a lot of doctor's appointments, but not to that extent. But that was it. No, I have to go to the doctor, sweetheart. I'll see you soon. Soon was acceptable. And when I came back next day, it was, oh, you're back soon. Yeah, yes, I am. See, I told you I wouldn't be gone for long.
I
Right?
guess that was a saving grace
It was.
of the disease.
It was.
Yes.
It was.
And you also blog.
Yeah.
You continue to blog.
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, actually, writing has always been therapeutic for me from a child. You wouldn't believe how many bad poetry I have lying around somewhere. Oh, they're awful, they're terrible, but they were immediate, and it was helpful. You see, I think there is a plan in each person's life. It was helpful that I dabbled in that sort of short form, because I didn't have time to keep my journal really well during Alzheimer's. I was just too busy. You just don't have time. So I started the blog. And that was the way for me to write about what was happening, what was going. And it always had a meander. And it's called Paula's Meanderings. And it always had a meander which sort of summed up in 10 or 20 words what it was about, right? That was my therapy. And then friends, why don't you put this in? You're saying so much that could be helpful to other people. So that grew into the book. And I keep on doing it because I'm not as often now, but I still do it and will continue. And I'm even considering a podcast. And I'll do it because I have always been an advocate. And it is Alzheimer's that has given me my advocacy topic for my third age.
That's so wonderful. So where can people buy the book?
Oh, it's at bookstores. It's on Amazon. It's you can get it in ebook form on Google and wherever. And I'm a librarian. You can go to your library and ask for it.
Wonderful. And what's the name of your blog? Where can people find you?
Oh, Paula's Meanderings. That's all you have to look up for. Paula's Meanderings will take you to the blog. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for sharing your journey. This really is a wonderful book. I couldn't put it down. And you mentioned when we had talked previously that you wanted people to just read this book to learn.
Yeah.
And I think you really did that. You really did the job of writing the book, making it a guide, sharing nuggets of wisdom, making it humorous, including quotes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a page turner.
Thanks.
So all of this in one book. Do you have another book in you?
Oh, maybe.
Yes.
I
There's
never know.
always that maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yes.
Thank you again, Paula.
I want to thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm never too busy to talk about this journey because I think it's important and it's getting even more so. The statistics are more and more and more because we're living so much longer. And although old age is not a particular marker, the older you get, the more likely you may become affected by that. The poor body just can't take anymore. The brain is then, is affected. And remember, it's a disease.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to stigmatize it. It's another disease.
Yeah, I love that you do mention that a lot in the book.
Yeah.
It's not the person. You always had to remind yourself that this is not Bert.
Yeah.
It's a disease.
Yeah.
Especially as time went on and it took over more of his brain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you again.
Thank you.